Good morning, Virginia. Good afternoon, Oxford and Avignon. And I'm Raghida Dergham in Beirut. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning, wherever you are. Good evening. This is the last episode of the spring-summer season of Beirut Institute Summit e-policy circles. It has been amazing. Imagine, in 13 weeks, we had 52 guests from 20 different countries. I think this is something that is magnificent, and what a great finale, if you will, for this season. I will be announcing what will be happening next at the end of this fantastic last episode with my very distinguished guests for this week. His Excellency Lakhdar Brahimi, he is former Foreign Minister of Algeria, former UN Envoy to Syria, Special UN Representative for Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Haiti, South Africa. He brokered the Taef agreement for ending the civil war in Lebanon. I wish he would broker something now so that we can have real peace in Lebanon, because we are in a mess. Anyway, the Right Honorable Jack Straw is the former British Foreign Secretary. He also served as Home Secretary of the UK. Ambassador Thomas Pickering, an old friend also from the United Nations, where he served as an ambassador. He is former US Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs. He was Senior Vice President of International Relations of the Boeing Company. Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, who is the US Special Representative for Afghanistan Reconciliation at the State Department, he regrets he's unable to join us as planned. He is in the middle of intra-Afghan negotiations as we speak. He planned to join us from Afghanistan, but his meetings are ongoing. We wish him the very best of luck on this important endeavor. I thank you for joining me. As always, I would have the pleasure of listening to each and every one of you for 4 minutes, and then we will engage in a conversation. I will start with His Excellency Lakhdar Brahimi. 4 minutes to you, please, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Raghida, for inviting me, and I greet with a great deal of warmth your two other guests who are old acquaintances and friends from previous lives. And I'm very happy to participate in this discussion. How much I can contribute, I'm not sure, but we will try. I think that the theme of all your this season for you was how to restore or establish stability. Stability has been broken, there is no doubt about that. And you know, how you are going to do it is a very big question. Whatever one thinks or the way one wants to go, the first observation has to be necessarily about multilateralism and the frontal attack it has been subjected to these last few years. In a globalized world, in a global village, by definition, you know, the village or the global world cannot function without multilateralism, without people talking to one another, without people working with one another. This is being discussed all the time, everywhere. So I don't think we need to dwell on it per se very, very much. But let's see where some of the problems are from the perspective of someone like me. I think one needs to look at this at least two levels. One is between the big boys, the big powers, and the second is at the lower level, what happens to the ordinary people like us, and ordinary countries like the country I come from, and the region I come from. At the level of big powers, you know, we used to complain very much in so many ways about the exceptionalism of the Americans. You know, the United States is the strongest, the biggest, you know, all the superlatives you want to use are good for the United States. But you know, when Clinton and Madeleine Albright used to say that you know, America is the indispensable country, we used to find that a little bit excessive. How about us? And every country is necessary. But now that the Americans are saying, "Look, leave us alone," we realize that they are indeed indispensable, and that you know, we miss even quarreling with them. That they just look the other way is extremely difficult for them and for us. Whether their leaders realize that it is difficult for them, that is their problem. But I think we do realize that we need the United States, even and perhaps even more when we disagree with them. Then there is China. You know, I had the privilege of meeting Deng Xiaoping 30 years ago. Fascinating discussion. He was absolutely certain that his country was taking off. It was just starting to take off. But he was, you know, his advice to his people and his successors was keep a low profile. I think what they understood is that keep a low profile until you are strong enough that your voice will be heard. I think that with the present leadership, the idea is that, yeah, we are now strong enough, and our voice has to be heard. We have to accommodate China. You know, we cannot just say, please stay down, shut up, continue to listen to Deng Xiaoping. No, I think China has come out, has come up, and it has to be heard. How are we going to accommodate China is another. One last point. In our region, multilateralism, even at the regional level, has disappeared probably even more than it has at the world level. It is not possible that our main countries in the Middle East and North Africa do not talk to one another. We need to talk to one another. We need to fix our problems ourselves, perhaps with the support of others, but no problem in our region can be solved.
This is very important, what you told us, Lakhdar, Brahimi. But I didn't hear the last thing you said. You said no country is what?
No, I said our countries are not talking to one another in the Middle East. And no problem in our region can be solved, even with the support of others, if we do not talk with one another. We need first to talk to one another. Maybe we can solve our problems alone. Maybe we need support, help, mediation from others. But not talking to one another is a prescription for these problems continuing and becoming worse.
You gave us a lot of ideas that we need to discuss when we engage in a conversation. Thank you very much. But I will go now to Jack Straw for his 4 minutes. And then, as I said, later on, we will be discussing China and the US and what you said about the indispensability of this country and how do you live with it if it is indispensable. The United States of America, that is, and China, how to accommodate them when they only came to say, I'm here when I'm strong. Jack Straw, 4 minutes to you, please.
Thank you very much, Raghida, and good afternoon to Lakhdar and good morning to Tom Pickering. Your exam question was Stability Redefined, who authors the future? And as Lakhdar has indicated, it needs no crystal ball to see the relentless rise of China, which is becoming the world's largest economy, and critically, a world power able to match the monopoly superpower status which the United States has enjoyed since the fall of the Soviet Empire 30 years ago. And the imponderable here is how the US reacts and accommodates itself to this new reality. For we need to understand that China challenges the essence of the United States. Its exceptionalism, its idea that it's bigger, better, more morally superior, and more influential than any other nation in the world. If it's sensible to its own interests, however, to the related need for international stability, sensible to being the author of the future, the US has to adjust itself to this new reality. That requires the United States to end its retreat into this odd combination of military belligerency and diplomatic isolation into which it's currently propelled itself, and develop a more active foreign policy which embraces its natural allies. It also needs to work out not only how it confronts China where it needs to, but how it cooperates with China as well, because they will be the losers if they don't. And we can see the consequences, if that doesn't happen, all too predictably in Iran, where the withdrawal from the JCPOA by the US has strengthened the hardliners in Iran, impoverished Iranian people, and detached the US from erstwhile allies, including the UK, I must say, whilst doing next to nothing to halt Iran's nuclear research. And it's pushed Iranians where nobody wanted them to be, and they don't want to be, most of them, which is towards China with this extraordinary 25-year deal, which is, we don't know the full details, but it's going to give China huge advantage in Iran, but also as a platform for greater influence in the Middle East and North Africa. We've also got to consider how we respond to the rise of authoritarianism across the world, that part of the world we thought was relatively democratic. Many countries in Eastern Europe, Turkey, India, and of course, many too, across the Middle East, where the hopes of the Arab Spring have so faded. Now, it's not enough to lament what's happened in these countries. They, along with trends visible in the US and in the UK with Brexit, challenge Western liberal assumptions, which most of us thought would reign supreme. And those of us who have these values have to examine why their attraction for so many has dimmed. And it's principally, in my view, because these values have lost their appeal to too many of the dispossessed, of the less well-off. Now, the period after the Second World War could easily have descended into the chaos, despair, and fascism that happened after the First War. The principal difference, as Lakhdar has indicated, was the attitude of the United States. And we do need the US. The US, in a way, has the future of the world in its hands. It could be the author of that book of the future, but it needs to take it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to make sure that I understood you when you have spoken about the rise of totalitarianism. Did you mean to excuse China from being a totalitarian state, or are you saying that China?
I just accept it as a given. That, sorry.
Accept it as a given.
Hang on a second.
All right.
I just accept it as a given that China is China. Shimon Peres said, just because there's a problem doesn't mean the solution is there. It may just be a fact. It's a fact that China is an undemocratic state. We don't have the tools to change that, and it's to do with Chinese history and all sorts of things.
All right, I'm going to stop you, and I'm going to engage with you later on this issue, but maybe, I'm sure that Tom Pickering has something to say about this, unless he has something different that he prepared, and then we will definitely talk about all these important matters. Tom Pickering, please, 4 minutes to you. You have to unmute. You have to unmute, Tom Pickering.
How is that?
Okay, now we can hear you.
Thank you, Raghida and Jack and Lakhdar. I work in Washington. There's a saying in Washington that's particularly appropriate, that coming at the end of this particularly important chain, that while everything has been said, not everybody has said it yet. So let me go in a very quick order. I think there is one set of first order challenges to stability redefined. And both of my predecessors have talked about it, China and the United States. The US is having a seminal election which will determine much of whether it can move in the right direction or the wrong one. China is deeply preoccupied in creating at least an economic ascendancy in the Asia and Pacific beyond. The contention between them has all the signs of a slow-moving, slow-rolling Cuban Missile Crisis. None of them will profit from a conflict, and diplomacy is the only alternative, as both of my predecessors have pointed out. Russia is a third player. It wants into a multipolar world. There is significant uncertainty between Russia, China, and the United States. A new nuclear arms race is deeply in the making, with Russia particularly and the United States. Russia has always wanted to be part of a bilateral duality controlling world decisions from the top. Will that be China and the US, China and Russia, or the US and Russia? Certainly a mariage à trois is fraught with difficulties. A second order series of problems comes up in the region we are most concerned about today. China and Iran have signed a deal. It would be, in my view, wildly over-optimistic to say that that is a new world power in the making. China will never put all of its oil imports in one particular basket, and Iran has no special affiliation to a secular communist model of how to run things. The rest of the Middle East is chaotic. Iran and Saudi Arabia are in deep conflict over who runs the region. The answer is neither is in a position to do so unilaterally, and some balance, stability, and security needs to be achieved. Turkey is re-Ottomizing itself with a hard religious focus as a kicker. Will it be, in a sense, one of the major players in the region, or will, in fact, time change Turkey back again to a strong regional power with a European connection? That seems highly unlikely. Yemen, Syria, Libya are waiting for Godot. Is it the US, or is it China, or is it Russia? After the American elections, we may see more or less. The US will take time to recover. And my final point is that the outcome of the US election for Trump will be more of the same unless somebody is able to change his vision from self-promotion to legacy promotion. Hard to conceive of. For Biden, time is the enemy if he's elected. He will have to deal with China, with Russia, with New START, and with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in Iran, all tremendously consuming, against the backdrop of domestic issues which for him will be even more important, beginning with the trifecta of the virus, depression, and racism. Staffing will occupy too much time. Undoing the Trump problem will be too difficult. Meeting the demands of a changed world will further change the question. Multilateralism and communications are clearly formulas that must be looked at and adopted.
Thank you very much, Thomas Pickering. You know, I think we will start with focus on the US-China relations and China, Russia, and China, Iran, etc. I think this is where we'll start, and then we will go to other, we will go to the elections and other matters. Let's start with that. Let me start with Lakhdar Brahimi. The US is, as you said, is, as you quoted Madeleine Albright, in fact, to be precise, is an indispensable country now. And if you heard Jack Straw speak about China, he says, it is what it is, you need to live with China as is. How do you reconcile these two things? And although you said, and I noted, Lakhdar Brahimi, when you spoke of China having wanted to have a low profile in the past until it became strong, and now it's saying, well, take me seriously, and here I am, I'm flexing muscles. Please address these points, and then I'll take it back to Pickering and Straw. Lakhdar Brahimi, I need you to unmute. You need to unmute. Just leave it. Let us do the muting and unmuting. It's much easier. Okay, I'm going to go to Jack Straw to Lakhdar Brahimi figures the unmute, the muting and unmuting. Okay, did you unmute? Okay. Jack Straw, until Lakhdar Brahimi, until we have Lakhdar Brahimi?
Lakhdar, now, fine.
China has always been, for a very long time, a big power in the making. It hasn't sprung on us out of thin air. It has been a very, very big, very important country. It has developed, the last 30 years, it has developed in an extraordinary speed, but it has been going, towards that end for a very long time. They still continue to say we are a developing country. They say that we will be a major power.
It will stay part of 77.
2050. In 2015, we will do away with great poverty. 2035, we will do away with poverty altogether. And in 2050, we will be a big power. That is what they say now.
Right.
I think they have been pushed into claiming a place at the table a bit early by the fact that the Americans, as a matter of fact, welcomed them at the beginning and then realized that this is a danger and started creating problems for themselves and for the Chinese. China is there to stay. They are going to have lots and lots of problems inside their country and with their neighbors. Their problem is not only with the United States. As a matter of fact, it is much more with their neighbors.
Right.
You have three big countries in Asia. It's not only China. You have China, India, and Japan. How these three countries will organize their interrelationship will count for Asia and for the rest of the world.
So are we? If we take a look at the current U.S.-Chinese relations, and in recent weeks in particular, there's been a clear, or rather clarity in the intention of the administration, the Trump administration at least, to really say this is an enemy. China is an enemy, and it is threatening its neighbors, not only us. And there is, and some people think that confrontation is to a point of no return. Therefore, how do we expect it to spill globally? Whether it is in the neighborhood, Lakhdar Brahimi, quickly please, or in other places of the world, such manifested in such a pact between China and Iran. Very quickly, Lakhdar Brahimi, before I solicit others' opinions.
I think that China is learning how to live with the rest of the world. And the rest of the world has got to learn how to live with China. Their neighbors, especially the small ones, are extremely concerned that with this, mass of land and people who used to be, dormant next to them, and who all of a sudden have become ebullient. They are going all over the place, creating islands, creating weapons, and I don't know. Their neighbors are terribly, terribly concerned. You see, multilateralism is needed everywhere for all of us to learn how to live with one another in a changing world. Tom has mentioned Turkey. Turkey is not anymore a European country. They have been kicked out of Europe, and they have accepted it. They have now become a Middle East country, and they are trying to make a place for themselves. I hope that they will do it in a wise manner, but we have got to accept that they are now part of the Middle East.
Do we have to accept what Tom Pickering called the Ottomanization? Do we have to accept that?
No, definitely not. We have got to accept Turkey, which used to think of itself as a European country, being interested in us just like Spain is. whereas now they are a Middle Eastern country. That's what we have to accept.
Okay.
But we cannot accept them on their terms.
Okay, so but sorry about this, because Jack Straw seems to be saying that we have to accept China on its terms, but we'll get back to that quickly. After Brahimi, very quickly on whether you think it's good for the region or bad for the region that China has agreed to go into a 25-year-old pact with Iran, given Iran's relations with its neighbors and with many countries in the Arab region. Quickly, please. Lakhdar.
It's neither good nor bad. It is probably good for Iran now because of the isolation that they were in. But it's up to us to see how we can live with one another. This is the, we don't have to love one another, day, lunchtime, and evening, but we have got to accept one another as neighbors. Criticize one another, perhaps even have problems with one another. But we cannot just say, you have no place here. Everybody has a place here.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Thomas Pickering before I go back to you, Jack Straw, because I want to hear what he means on the issue of Turkey Ottomanization. Say that again. Say 3 times. Do you think Turkey is and then I will get you back to China. But do you think Turkey is establishing itself in the sense that you spoke through Libya only, or through other places? When you use this word, did you mean Libya, which we will discuss, or did you mean otherwise?
Let me be very brief on Turkey, because I have something to say on China as well.
Yes, I want
Turkey,
to go.
direct question. Yemen is now of interest to Turkey. Syria has always been of interest to Turkey. Iraq is of great interest to Turkey. Iran is of salient interest to Turkey. Years ago, a Hungarian foreign minister after the Second World War said Hungary was the only country in the world completely surrounded by Hungarians. Now it's possible to say Turkey is still the only country in the world almost completely surrounded by problems. And clearly, the Russia question is fraught, but not totally bad. Their problems with Greece remain forever. Mm-hmm. And their problems with Bulgaria are certainly calmed, but not totally extinguished. Now, if I could just address China, I would say 2 things very briefly. Raghida, you're going to have to let me talk about this because I won't give up. The first point on China, Raghida, is that Lakhdar and Jack are totally right. And the implications in your question that America is a normal country are totally wrong. Mr. Trump's vision and work in China has converted itself to an election idea that by opposing China, he will have another very useful argument to win the American election. Mr. Trump's policies have nothing to do with vital interests of the United States and everything to do with Trump's election and how he can best proceed. He's failed with COVID, so now he's turning to law and order. He's failed with other things, and he's trying to change the problem. And so it's important not to believe that the US for the moment is a normal country with interests that prevail in Mr. Trump's mind.
All right. Can I just then ask you, how come the Democratic candidate, Mr. Joe Biden, has not taken a strong position against where this administration stands regarding China? I have not heard Biden speak strongly.
You aren't listening. Yesterday, he gave a very strong speech in Delaware in which he really castigated Mr. Trump for all the obvious things. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what's wrong with Trump. It does take a genius to convert his base.
So are you saying that this is a passing storm? The US-China conflict or confrontation will pass should Biden be elected? Is this what you're saying?
I was saying at the end of my prepared remarks that Mr. Biden faces a host of very new, difficult, and taxing problems and will not, in my view, be able to use the time efficiently as all of his predecessors have found. American presidents who have done well with the Congress in their first term have lost it in the midterm. That is a curse of disorganization, of overwork, and of disputes. and a system that's pretty sclerotic.
What did you mean, Tom Pickering, when you said that the China-Iran pact is, you used the word widely over-optimistic? For whom? For China or for Iran or for the world? I mean, whoever is looking at it.
I agree totally with Lakhdar. It's neither good nor bad. We have the role to play.
Ambassador Pickering, let us, we had agreed that let us not speak off the top of each other's because Zoom is very difficult. My question, please, to you, if you would allow me to finish my question to you, Ambassador Pickering, is the China-Iran pact dangerous for this region? Many in the region here feel that it is a serious problem for them. Are they being foolish? And please repeat what you wanted to say when you spoke while I was still asking you the question, because we did not hear it. Kindly go ahead.
Mit das Fin. My sense is that with respect to China and the United States, the US operates on different principles, and it will as long as Trump is around, unless Trump totally changes his mind were he to win the election. I think it is important to believe that they will be an important player in the region, as I think we all have concluded. On China-Iran, my sense is that it is of mutual interest to both countries to have a 24-year relationship over oil, but China will never put all of its oil imports in the basket of one country. And it is important for Iran, including access to military equipment, to have a relationship with China. Up until now, China has not been a major player in the Middle East, but it is increasing its role, particularly through commerce, one belt, one road, the potential to support the Middle East, say in the Security Council and other things. China is emerging as a very tough and very vigorous and very diplomatic player.
I mean, okay, you seem to be of the same way when you speak about China, at least with a bit of difference. But I just cannot understand why three amazingly wise men are saying to us, basically, accept whatever China tells you, while one of you admits that it's totalitarian. The other one thinks that it's, it somehow wants to have its cake and eat it, wants to stay developing country till it's strong enough. And you're saying basically all the trouble is all because of the President of the United States. So I need to push back with all three of you, but I need to give Jack Straw the floor now, because I'm sure he wants to say something on that. But go ahead, Jack Straw.
Really, look, on China, I don't think Ricky, Lakhdar or I were saying if we were in charge of China, we would have this system, but we're not in charge of China. It seems to me a key tenet of sensible diplomacy is that you have to deal with countries as they are. You may wish to see them alter. You can influence them, for sure, for good or ill, and there's loads of evidence of that. But you can't say to China, we're only going to deal with you when you follow a Western liberal democratic model, because that's never going to happen. Even if they abandon communism, they're not going to go to a Western liberal democratic model, because it doesn't exist in their consciousness or philosophy. So that's what I'm saying. But we can influence them, and this is what's missing particularly from Trump's foreign policy, such as it is, and indeed much EU policy. Iran, if I was an Iranian leader, if I was Rouhani or even Khamenei, if faced with the desperate situation they've got, I would say, do a deal with China, because what else can we do? They don't like the Chinese. As Tom said, they hate the idea of communism, secularism, but where else can they go? So they've been pushed that way by Trump's policy. If you take the Ottomanization of Turkey, now, I was heavily involved in bringing Turkey into the fold and making it an accession state of the EU. And Chirac and the German Chancellor Schroeder, as well as Blair, were all understood the benefits of this, although there were downsides as well. Then Sarkozy and Merkel decided to treat Turkey less favorably, for example, than Bulgaria or Romania or Cyprus, with much worse records on many dossiers, were being treated. We kept saying to them in the UK, you're going to push Turkey towards the east. It's got to go somewhere. And that's precisely what has happened. Now, I think many Turks don't want to be Ottomanized, and Erdogan is not going to be last forever. But for the time being, that's where they are, and they too want to be treated.
Jack Straw, I mean, honestly, I find what you're saying extremely dangerous, because it's a message to all countries: do get strong and tell us what you want, and we will bow. And you're saying that your message is saying that China is China, and you just deal with it. Whereas, if there is a defiance of, if there's, and in fact, I think it was the UK and other countries who have been critical of Chinese behavior on more than one occasion, including using the veto repeatedly with Russia against resolutions related to Syria, last of which was humanitarian in the Security Council. I just find it incredibly dangerous that you just say, just China is China, accept it and move on.
No,
I thought engagement is about changing behavior, no?
Of course, yeah. But and that's about using your head. As it happens, I mean, I support the position the British government has taken on Huawei, because it's dangerous for us to hand over our key infrastructure to the Chinese, and they would never do it in reverse. And for example, on Hong or what the Chinese are doing against the Uyghurs. But
on Hong Kong, you said, sorry, say it. Do you support what China is doing on Hong Kong, or do you support?
I support the British government on Hong Kong, the exact opposite, all right? And the British government, it's to do it justice, is trying to engage with China at the same time. Now, short of us getting an international military force together from every other country in the world and invading China, we have to deal with China through diplomatic means. And we therefore, as I said in my opening remarks, yes, identify those things where you've got to confront China. And that too includes military, we ought to, and we are, but with the US, involved in military exercises in the South China Sea, so that does not just become a colony for China, but also work out how you better coordinate and cooperate with them where you can, because it's just because they do exist, Raghida, they're not going to go away however much we shout. And the whole history of diplomacy is that even at the margin, you can influence things for the better or for the worse. And that's what I think we have to do.
Okay. And one question to each of you, like yes or no, because I want to move on to Iran. Do you fear a military conflict between the United States and China? Tom Pickering, yes or no?
I said, yes, I do, given what is the uncertain nature of the leadership on both sides, although I clearly believe they do not want a conflict, but I think the failure of diplomatic communications and the misinterpretation and accidental nature of meeting situations could produce a conflict. One would hope it would not last long. One would hope it could be contained, but it is not something you can dismiss out of hand as never happening.
Lakhdar, Brahimi, same question.
The fear is accidents.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants a conflict with anyone. Even the Israelis, who maybe at one time wanted very much, and they want the Americans to go to war, not themselves. But neither the Americans nor the Iranians want a conflict. But an accident can happen considering the lack of communication.
So you're saying,
that you have got to talk to them.
Lakhdar Brahimi, you're saying you do not expect a conflict neither between the US and China, nor between the US and Iran. Did I hear you correctly?
What I say is that nobody wants a conflict. but they may drift into a conflict without really intending it. In January 1914, all the prediction of how the year was going to be and so on were saying that 1914 was going to be great. Nobody thought in January 1914 that we were going to have a major war a few months later. So this is what we have got to take into consideration.
And Lakhdar, Brahimi, please stay with me on the issue of the possible conflict. You are someone who knows Lebanon extremely well. Right now, in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, we heard of this very weird story of what happened between Hezbollah and the Israelis. Do you think that there may be a war in the making through the Lebanese front right now? Israel, Hezbollah, Israel, Iran, before the elections. What do you know of the Iranian decision, how to use Hezbollah now in this moment of difficulties with the United States?
I don't know enough about what is going on either inside Lebanon or between Israel and Hezbollah to speak intelligently about it.
Do you fear a potential conflict?
I fear conflicts in our region everywhere.
Right.
Whether people want it or not.
Yeah.
You see, because we don't talk to one another, we may find ourselves in a conflict, God knows where.
Okay. Can you kindly tell me, Lakhdar Brahimi, I'm going to move on to the Iranian situation. Do you think now the situation in Iran, given that there is unrest inside Iran, that the Iranians are very active in Syria, the revolutionary guards, not the Iranian people, of course, and in Lebanon. Of course, we know how the Iranian influence is manifested in Iraq through Hashd al-Sha'bi and in Lebanon through Hezbollah. Do you think that Iran is playing a constructive role in the region now, or do you think it is going on with what some in the region call an expansionist Iran, taking the revolution, exporting its revolution into the Arab geography? Go ahead, Lakhdar Brahimi.
I'm speaking under the control of both Tom and Jack. They know the situation in Iran and its neighbors 1,000 times more better than me. But very simple from my simplistic point of view. Iran has always been saying, you do not respect us enough, to everybody, to their neighbors and to the rest of the world. We are a big civilization. We are a big country. We are an important country. And you do not treat us as such. That is what they have been saying all along.
Yeah.
When the Americans and the British invaded Iraq, what they did really is give the country that was the biggest headache of Iran, give them control of that country.
Yeah.
When they took control of Iraq, they stopped saying we are an important country. They started saying we are the most important country in the region. And you have got to treat us like that. This is what has happened.
But
When things, listen. When you do things, what you do has consequences.
Of course.
You go to, you invade Iraq and you hand it over to Iran, and you want Iran to continue to behave the way they did when Iraq was their biggest enemy?
Yeah.
Can't be. It can't be.
Yeah, but then as if, again, I'm sorry, I know I sound like somebody who said, we journalists, that's probably my training. But the point is that, okay, what you said is correct. And I want to take it to others as well. And the point is that right now, Iran, Jack Straw, Iran has paramilitary forces that report to Tehran. It is true. That is the Hashd al-Sha'bi in Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and that is an absolute. It is a violation of sovereignty of both these countries, because the sovereignty of Lebanon is being violated when Hezbollah says, I report back to Tehran, and when Hashd al-Shaabi says, I report back to, why is that okay?
It's not okay. It is not okay at all. Yeah, but you've got to understand where that came from.
Yeah.
All right.
So
So
Lebanon, you had a civil war. You had Syria, who was, by the way, invited by the Lebanese into Lebanon, who invited Iran in and allowed them for years to form Hezbollah.
yeah, but can we go forward? I understand that.
So I'm not saying that this is great, that we applaud what Iran is doing. Well, but let's start by saying why that has happened.
But okay,
and then wait a minute. Even when we oppose it, that's no justification for not talking to the Iranians. Talk to the Iranians and quarrel with them every morning and every evening.
Yeah,
but you cannot just say.
Sorry, we understood what you said, where it came from, and this is why it happened. My question is, what to do about it now? Okay. Go ahead, Jack Straw.
Yeah. Well, the first thing you want to do is what Lakhdar's talked about, that you have to have a constructive relationship with the Iranians. I mean, they're in the region, it's 80 million people, it's middle income. They can be absolutely infuriating, as anybody who's ever dealt with them understands, regardless of their own politics. But they're there. And why are they in Iraq? Why are they in
Jack Straw, but they're there and they're doing their thing. My question to you is,
I don't approve of this.
Sovereignty, about violating the sovereignty of other countries.
I understand that. Of course I understand it. But why are they doing this? Well, Lakhdar's explained how they ended up in this position. And these days, it's partly about them wanting to feel like a great power in the region. And their history of humiliation over decades, centuries, particularly by the US and the UK, but other countries as well, is one they want to break out of. So that means this is their Persianism, if you like. That strong sense of Persian nationalism. So they want to be there. They want to be there, exercising their muscles, throwing their weight around. But they also, because they know how vulnerable they are militarily to powers like even Saudi Arabia in a conventional war, and particularly to the US, their defensive strategy is one of what they call forward defense. So their view is, if they can, as it were, keep their front line in Iraq, in the Lebanon, then they are more likely to be safe. So that's what it's about. And again, if you want to change that, and I do, and Lakhdar does, and I'm sure Tom does, you don't just shout about it, this is awful, but you have to engage in difficult discussions with them as well as with others.
Yeah, Tom Pickering, please go ahead. I know you have something to say on this, and please address this issue of how do we go forward? We've heard of who's at fault from the beginning, George W. Bush, and of course he actually gave, in his invasion of Iraq, he gave Iraq to Iran. No doubt about that. But and also that JCPOA, with everybody signing on to it, did not really put the foot down and say, do not interfere in other countries. In fact, it had enabled Iran to go ahead with the Revolutionary Guards, to go ahead and expand what they've done, in particular in Syria. So, Thomas Pickering, can you please address this? I know Jack Straw wants to say something, but we're running out of time. I'm going to get back to you, Jack Straw, but let me go to Tom Pickering first.
Several brief points. The US invasion of Iraq in 2003 was a masterpiece of the development of unintended consequences. Secondly, Iran and the United States had no contact with any reasonable degree of effective negotiations. Those negotiations produced an agreement. It was less than perfect an Iranian nuclear weapon. That was tossed aside by the United States, and the United States bears great responsibility for that. If there is an American election, the US has a new opportunity to work with Iran and influence Iran. It is, I think, beyond imagination the necessity to return to the agreement that Trump pushed away. If Iran won't, then we have to have a diplomatic effort to try to bring them back to something like that. We did that because we thought the biggest threat was Iran having a nuclear weapon. That may be wrong, but I don't disagree with it. And we were not prepared to pay in other coin for getting things like ballistic missile controls or dealing with Iran's intervention in other countries. Jack is right that in the United Nations Charter, we have a primary problem. You should not interfere in other countries, and self-determination is a right that everybody enjoys, including self-determination with the assistance of others.
Okay, but Tom Pickering, let's be realistic here. There is an outright intervention by Iran in several Arab countries, where I'm sitting, in Lebanon. And it's something they absolutely admit, and they speak about it publicly. It is nothing they're hiding. So therefore, when you see a collapse of a country like Lebanon before your eyes, gentlemen, and you know where it's coming from, other than the huge corruption, and let me start by saying that everyone in the Lebanese elite in politics is accused of corruption, and rightly so. But the decision is actually by Iran to make sure that Lebanon remains under the grip of Hezbollah. That is not intervention. Tom Pickering, and then Jack Straw, and then Lakhdar Brahimi. Tom Pickering. And why does it matter to you?
I would say the following, Raghida. I agree with everything you said, and I do not support Iranian intervention in other states, whether it's in Iraq or Lebanon or Syria or elsewhere. I do think, however, that you have to reckon that the way to stop them is probably military activity against them. And some of that Israel has undertaken. Some of that the United States does quietly, but more focused on the Islamic State than the Shahab, but also unwilling to get into a conflict with Iran over this issue, but equally unwilling to speak to Iran diplomatically about ways to begin to resolve these problems. And it's the latter that opens a new course. The U.S. is not there. It may be not the essential country now, but it has a role to play. And as we have seen, no others seem to be able to step forward, deal with Iran in a way that has the capacity to begin to turn things around.
Tom Pickering, are you saying that the only way to get Lebanon out of this imminent collapse, which it's in fact, it is in a collapse, is for the United States to speak with Iran? Why can't you just somehow think of something a bit more realistic than that?
I'm a diplomat and I deal with tough problems. And tough problems are not solved by easy silver bullets. And my view is the military in the United States has proven its total incapacity in Iraq and Afghanistan to solve deep and difficult political problems. Were they try in Lebanon, I suspect we would have the same answer, unfortunately. So we are left with the question of diplomacy, perhaps backed by military and economic force. It's not a certain proposition, but the U.S. does not seem willing or interested in engaging itself either for Iran, for Syria, for Yemen, or for Libya these days, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Tom Pickering. I'm going to have to start with you at that. I'm going to go to Jack Straw and with the same question, unless you want to say something else, because you have 1 minute to conclude what you have to say before we end this wonderful animated session.
Raghida, I understand how awful it is in Lebanon at the moment and what the reasons are for it. It's not true that Iran only began this interference in its neighbors after the signing of the JCPOA. That's simply untrue, and it's made that's a lie which is perpetrated by Trump, who said that they use the money.
No, we did not say that. No, but no, nobody said that. We said it was exacerbated, not it started.
I don't think the two are directly related. Moreover, short of, again, wide-scale military force. I don't mean some military activity to supplement diplomatic activity, but widespread military activity. for the US to take over Iran, which take over Lebanon, completely off the table. But to talk to the Iranians and the other key actors who are dealing and influencing the Lebanon. That's just true. And you say the Iranians don't want to talk to us. Of course, the Iranians want to talk to the US. How do you think that some US prisoners in Iran got released? That was out of direct private negotiations. They are desperate to talk, and they're happy to talk, provided it's on the right terms.
Okay, so they want conditional talks, the Iranians. They're not accepting to come to the table without conditions.
It depends on the circumstances. If you look at what John Kerry did, took 2 years of very patient negotiation through the Omanis. They early on, before Rouhani got there, actually, they finally built up confidence of the kind that people like Tom Pickering and Lakhdar Brahimi are brilliant at, and then they were able to have conversations. You can do that.
I have to leave it at that. Thank you very much, Jack. So I'm going to go to Lakhdar Brahimi with 2 minutes, please. It's not fair, so I want to ask you about this very question on Lebanon. Please address it, why it's okay to see the country collapse. But also, what do you think, quickly, do you think Egypt will go into Libya? I know it's not fair, but I'm throwing that in. You have exactly 1.5 minutes. Or 2 minutes.
In my 1.5 minutes, I will say something completely different. I hope we will agree.
Exactly.
You see, our region has changed. The situation in our region has changed, and it has changed because the Arab countries have stopped talking to one another and working with one another. We have stopped. We don't talk and work with one another. The region has become different. Now it is really the Middle East. We used to have the Arab world plus its neighbors. Now it is the Middle East. And in this Middle East, we have got to accept that Iran and Turkey have become part of that Middle East. And we have got to live with them, work with them, talk to them, fight with them, disagree with them, but we have got to accept that they are there. Israel is knocking on the door. They will be welcomed the day that they will accept that Palestine exists. But for the moment, I, for one, think that we should keep them out of everything. But Turkey and Iran are there. The Iranians, I can discuss with you all their mischiefs, all the things that they do wrong, that are unacceptable. They are favoring, 1,000 things that they are doing. I think we have got, yes, the Americans or some Americans and the Israelis are telling some of us, don't worry about Iran, we'll take care of it. They will not take care of Iran for us. We have got to get together with Iran, disagree with them. Maybe, we meet with them once and it breaks up and we disagree and so on, but we have got to start there. Our friends from outside the region can help us, but they cannot replace us.
Thank you.
We have got to start talking about our problems ourselves.
Thank you so very much, Lakhdar Brahimi. You all have honored me tremendously. We have come to the end of the first season of Beirut Institute Summit e-Policy Circles. As I said, 13 weeks, 52 guests, 20 countries. I thank all of the policymakers who made the first session such a great success. I thank all of you out there who tuned in live or who watched us with these e-Policy Circles on YouTube, on Beirut Institute channel. And you can still do the same because those episodes are truly timeless and a genuine contribution to understanding global politics. Both co-chairs of Beirut Institute Summit in Abu Dhabi, His Royal Highness Prince Turki Faisal and myself are very proud to announce that His Excellency President Barham Saleh of Iraq will kickstart the fall-winter season on September 9. We are honored and grateful, and we promise a most enriching second season until we meet, inshallah, in person for Beirut Institute Summit Edition 4 in Abu Dhabi in March 2021, God willing. From the team of Beirut Institute Summit e-Policy Circles, we wish you Eid Mubarak and a good rest of the summer to all of you. Thank you so much for the great honor. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
شكرا.
Shukran.
Shukran.
أهلا وسهلا توم، أهلا وسهلا جاك.
Eid Mubarak.
Thank you. Shukran jazila.
Jack, great to